The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days, and neither had Sarah's tears. She sat in the hospital parking lot, engine running, wipers beating a rhythm against the windshield that matched her breaking heart. Inside that building, behind those sterile walls and fluorescent lights, her mother was dying. Stage 4. Inoperable. 3 months, maybe 6 if they were lucky. The words still echoed in her head, clinical and cold. Delivered by a doctor who probably said them 5 times a week. Sarah pressed her forehead against the steering wheel and let herself crumble. Because out here, alone in her 10-year-old Honda, no one needed her to be strong. She didn't notice the old woman at first. Didn't see her shuffling through the downpour with nothing but a thin cardigan and a plastic grocery bag held over her silver hair. It wasn't until a sharp knock rattled her window that Sarah looked up, startled to see a weathered face peering in at her with eyes that seemed to hold entire lifetimes of stories. Sarah rolled down the window halfway, rain immediately spattering her arm. "Are you okay?" she asked, which felt absurd given her own circumstances. "Are you?" the woman countered, and something about the gentleness in her voice made Sarah's breath catch. "I'm Dolores. I've been sitting in that waiting room for 4 hours, and I saw you come out. Watched you walk to your car like the world was ending." She paused, rain dripping from her nose. "Sometimes it helps to talk to a stranger." That's how it started. Sarah found herself unlocking the passenger door, inviting this soaking wet woman into her car, into her grief. Dolores settled in with a sigh, setting her makeshift umbrella on the floor. She smelled like lavender and rain and something else. Sarah couldn't quite place. Maybe kindness, if kindness had a smell. "My mother," Sarah began, and then the whole story poured out. The diagnosis, the impossible treatment costs, the medical bills already piling up despite insurance, how she'd already taken out a second mortgage on the small house her mother had, bought 40 years ago, how she'd been working double shifts at the elementary school where she taught, tutoring on weekends, selling everything that wasn't nailed down. And still it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Dolores listened without interrupting, her gnarled hands folded in her lap. When Sarah finally ran out of words, the older woman reached over and squeezed her hand. Her skin was papery and warm. "I'm going to tell you something," Dolores said. "And you're going to think I'm crazy, but I need you to trust me." She reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a small, worn business card. "Tomorrow you go to this address. 2 o'clock. Don't be late." Sarah looked at the card. It was for a law office downtown, the kind in those old buildings with marble, lobbies and elevators that still had operators. "I don't understand." "You will," Dolores said. And then she was opening the door, stepping back into the rain. 2 o'clock, Sarah, promise me." Sarah never got the chance to ask how Dolores knew her name. The old woman disappeared into the storm. And when Sarah looked down at the card again, she wondered if she'd imagined the whole thing. But the card was real, slightly damp in her palm, and something about the encounter made her feel less alone than she had in weeks. She didn't tell anyone about the meeting. It seemed too strange, too much like something from a movie. But at 1:30 the next day, she found herself putting on her one good dress and driving downtown. The building was exactly as she'd pictured it, all marble and brass and the kind of quiet that money makes. The elevator operator, an elderly black man with kind eyes, smiled when she told him the floor. "Ah," he said, "you're here for the reading." "The reading?" "You'll see." The law office of Morrison, Chen and Associates took up half the 14th floor. A receptionist who looked fresh out of college led Sarah to a conference room where 3 other people already sat around a massive oak table. They all looked as confused as she felt. A lawyer entered, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and a smile that seemed genuine. "Thank you all for coming. I'm Margaret Chen. I know you're all wondering why you're here, and I promise everything will make sense shortly." She opened a leather portfolio. 3 days ago, we lost a very special woman. Her name was Dolores Martinez, and she spent her life doing something extraordinary. Sarah's breath caught. The woman from the parking lot. Margaret continued, "Dolores never married, never had children of her own. She worked as a nurse for 40 years, lived modestly, and saved every penny she could. But more than that, she watched. She paid attention to people, really paid attention. She noticed the single mother buying dented cans because they were cheaper, the veteran sleeping in his car in the hospital parking lot, the teacher crying because she couldn't afford her mother's treatment. Sarah's hands started shaking. Over the years, Dolores identified 43 people she believed deserved help. People who were kind despite their own struggles. People who gave even when they had nothing. People who never asked for help, but desperately needed it. Margaret looked around the table. The four of you are the last names on her list. She slid folders across the table to each of them. Sarah opened hers with trembling fingers. Inside were bank statements, transfer documents, and a letter in shaky handwriting. Dear Sarah, it began, I've been watching you for 2 years. I've seen you stay late to help students who struggle, buying them supplies with your own money. I've seen you bring groceries to your neighbor, the one who's too proud to ask for help. I've seen you love your mother with a fierceness that made me wish I'd had a daughter like you. You deserve more than the world has given you. My estate is being divided among 4 people, and you're receiving $675,000. Pay for your mother's treatment. Fix your house. Take a breath. And then when you can, I hope you'll keep watching too. The world needs more people who pay attention. Sarah couldn't read the rest through her tears. Around the table, the others were crying too. A young man who'd been working 3 jobs to support his disabled sister. An elderly couple who'd been facing eviction. A woman who'd been secretly paying for school lunches for kids whose parents couldn't afford them. How? Sarah managed to ask. How did she save this much? Margaret smiled. She lived in a rent-controlled apartment for 40 years. Drove the same car for 20. Never took a vacation, never bought anything she didn't need. And she invested wisely. When she died, her estate was worth $2.7 million. After taxes and fees, that's roughly $675,000 for each of you. The room was silent except for the sound of people trying not to sob. There's one condition, Margaret added. Dolores asked that each of you pay it forward in whatever way feels right. It doesn't have to be money. Sometimes it's just noticing someone who needs to be seen. 3 months later, Sarah's mother started her treatment. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. The tumor was shrinking. They were talking about years now, not months. But that wasn't the part that changed Sarah the most. She started paying attention. Really paying attention? She noticed the custodian at her school who always looked exhausted, and learned he was working nights to pay for his son's college. She organized a fundraiser. She saw the new teacher eating the same peanut butter sandwich every day and remembered being that broke. She started inviting her to lunch. And one rainy afternoon, she saw a young man sitting in a hospital parking lot, head on his steering wheel, shoulders shaking with sobs. Sarah didn't hesitate. She grabbed her umbrella and walked through the rain to tap on his window. Are you okay? She asked when he rolled it down. He looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. Not really. Would you like to talk about it? Sarah asked. Sometimes it helps to talk to a stranger. And as she settled into his passenger seat, offering comfort and listening with her whole heart, she could almost feel Dolores smiling, because this was what the old nurse had understood all along, that the most powerful thing in the world isn't money. It's someone who sees you when you're invisible, who reaches out when you're drowning, who reminds you that you're not alone. Her legacy wasn't the money. It was teaching 4 people how to truly see each other, and trusting that they would teach others in turn. That night, Sarah visited her mother in the hospital. The treatment had been rough, but color was returning to her cheeks. They sat together watching the evening news, and Sarah thought about all the people who'd never know Dolores's name, but whose lives would be touched by her kindness rippling outward. You seem different lately, her mother said, squeezing her hand. Lighter somehow. Sarah smiled. Someone reminded me that the world is full of good people. We just have to pay attention. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, and somewhere in the city, someone else was crying in their car, feeling alone and invisible. But maybe, just maybe, someone would notice. Someone would tap on their window. Someone would ask if they were okay. And the world would become a little bit kinder, one stranger at a time.